I know some of you, this may have been sparked an interest in an area that you want to look at. I'll send them back to you after I kind of take a few peeks at them so that you guys can use them later on. So. Comments on Mr. Dean?
He on his survey. He wouldn't done that.
Just about to get a whole bunch of all over.
John.
I'd be curious to know, ask a question if something to the effect of, if you're going into basic training in the military, would you be willing to go to basic training with an openly gay person?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question.
Because when you're in that basic training unit, that little flight or squadron, Air Force-wise, I mean, you're doing everything together as a unit, and, you know, you're taking showers and stuff together, you know, so to speak. You're all doing the same things at the same time. Would that be something you would be willing to do if you knew there was an openly gay individual going in that same unit?
That's, very, very, very good question. And, you know, guys, I know sometimes we tease and joke, but would you want that person watching your back? Mr. KJ.
I would ask on there, do you...
Okay, I didn't mean watch your back like that. KJ.
I would just ask, does this person think, or whoever you're surveying, do they think that the child being brought up in a homosexual home is going to be affected by that? Whether through while they're, you know, in high school, your parents are gay, you know, that's kind of, or is that going to be like, are they going to be homosexual as well? So, you know.
Great question, because that, you know, it'd be nice to see for those who say, hey, I think it's okay, if they would then take the next step and say, hey, I think this might affect the adopted children. Good question.
There's not a genes. Hey, Brad, just to comment on the question that John raised. If Don't Ask, Don't Tell is repealed, that's going to hurt retention rates in the military, and it's going to hurt recruiting rates as well.
Absolutely it will. Because, I mean, you know, who wants to go stand under a tree shower with 6 guys, and the whole time you're kind of thinking, no, I ain't about to bend down and get the soap.
Are you allowed to say that?
Yeah, I'm not sure that was ethical.
Yeah, I can.
Wow.
Not make the soap.
I'm going to do a survey on Brad.
Hold the class.
Hey, guys, hopefully one of the things you learn about me very early on is I'm a guy who lands the plane very much so. I'm not going to just sit here and waste all of our time, so, you know.
Thank you,
that's
Brad.
cool.
Thank you.
That's cool.
Next person, who's up?
I'll go ahead.
All right. Mr. Chuck. Mr. Chuck. By the way, Chuck, I don't know that I told you, I appreciated your intro to your paper last quarter. That was kind of a catchy intro.
Oh, well, thank you. I did not mean it that way. What was it? Okay. I just kind of jotted some things down that I can remember from my survey because I don't have my stuff with me.
Okay.
But I went to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, where I'm going to be a full-time minister.
Wait a second. Before you keep going, would it help you if I forwarded your survey findings back to you?
Sure. Well, yes.
All right. Okay, keep talking.
I went to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, where I'm going to be the full-time minister, and I went through the city, and I polled people on a scale from 1 to 10 because it was during a work day, and a lot of people didn't have a lot of time, so I figured if I could just get some numbers down, and I could maybe gauge where their thinking is. And so whenever I do finally get there, I'll know what I can preach on and perhaps what I could have kind of a forum on. And whenever I started my survey, I asked the people, and if they wouldn't answer this question with a yes, then I didn't hold them. I asked them, would they be willing to come to the Scott Bluff Church of Christ non-instrumental and listen to preaching on this, or if maybe there was a lectureship on this, would they be willing to come? And all of the people that I polled said yes. So I had 10 topics that I just wanted a 1 to 10 perspective on. And the very first one, and I believe that is Brad. The very first one was XXX bookstores or adult bookstores. And there aren't any in this town or within a 20-mile radius.
And Chuck, let me interrupt and give them what you told me. He asked them to rank each one of these ethical issues on a scale of 1 to 10, with no respective numbering for the other issues, 10 being totally ethical, 1 being unethical. So the lower the number, the more unethical they viewed each one of these things. So go ahead. You started with XXX bookstores.
All right. Just keep in mind, like he said, greater number, greater ethics. XXX bookstores, 2. And abortions, 1. I actually got into a conversation about the XXX bookstores with somebody, and this person was, they go to a Christian church, they baptize for the forgiveness of sins, so depending on where you are, they are a brother, depending on what your thinking is. So they're baptized into Christ for the forgiveness of their sins, and they're asking me what I feel about, well, how I feel about Christians going into XXX bookstores or even sex toy stores. And their feelings on it was that a Christian can, if it's between that man and his wife, and they felt like it didn't violate the marriage bed. So this person gave me a 10, and that's just one person baptized into Christ. All right.
I gotta interject. I'm sorry. Can somebody explain to me how you go into a porn shop and say that is keeping the marriage bed pure, unless it's all videos of your wife, at which case we got a whole nother problem. I mean, you know, in all seriousness, guys, I can maybe understand. You know, there are these women's parties that are going on right now that are like lingerie and, quote, toys for married couples. I can somewhat understand what's happening there, but when you take it to the next level, which is including pornography, to me, you've crossed the boundary of marriage.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I just had to, I couldn't let that one go.
Had to land another plane?
I did. Sorry. Sometimes I crash land them.
I'm not trying to be funny by any means. Whenever, so maybe a couple that are married, so you're saying they can go into the shop, say if they like to role play or do that thing, it wouldn't be a sin to buy some like clothing or costume type whatever, versus like now when you get to the pornography, to me that's just ridiculous. But
I'm sorry, my staff. Yeah. My staff's listening to y'all.
Brand the face right now. You know impression on the toy here.
Hey, back to you, Eric. I'm sorry. Killing me.
Look how red your face is, guys.
What's your face? That's what you can
Quentin still has
Okay.
voice.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Quentin.
That was it.
Wait, okay, so you don't see a difference between buying lingerie versus viewing pornography?
No, pornography is just ridiculous. I think that's wrong.
Okay.
But
Okay.
going into the store, we're talking about going into the store, say, yeah, lingerie or that kind of thing, if a couple likes to do that kind of thing. A married couple would like to do that.
Right.
So is
Yeah.
that as well?
Okay, have you ever been in Walmart, Quentin?
Yes, sir.
Do you know they sell lingerie in Walmart?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. What's the difference in you walking in Walmart versus walking into another store that strictly sells that?
Just the
Influence.
connotation, the negative connotation that it brings with it, I guess.
Okay, I can go along with that. If that particular store though does not sell pornography, let's use Victoria's Secret as our for instance. Is it okay for a married couple to go into a Victoria's Secret store and purchase lingerie for that married couple?
Nothing's wrong with that.
Okay, I would agree. Now, if you're taking your teenage daughter in there, we got problems.
Right.
But, here again, guys, remember, we're focusing on, in fact, I think far too many preachers and Christians do not really appreciate books like the Song of Solomon. We don't really appreciate what the Bible says about God creating man or woman for man and some of the more sexual verses of the Bible. If you get up and you start a sermon and you start out by saying, women, you need to allow your husbands to enjoy your breast, you're probably going to get people have a stroke right there in the pew, and yet what I just said is scriptural.
That's a moving experience, I'm sure.
John.
As far as the Victoria's Secret, I am going to disagree with you in this aspect, and that is, with all the advertising and all the marketing in that store, guess what the man is looking at as a model for that?
That's true.
That's someone else.
That's true. That's true. I can totally agree. And would I personally want somebody supporting that particular store? Guys, if you think about what they're putting on TV, and I'm going to tell you, I've never watched it, don't plan on watching it. But every year they have some kind of a lingerie show where they got people parading in their drawers up and down this little runway. That by no means needs to be supported by faithful Christian. John, very, very good point. I guess I need to scale back my thing and say Dillard's or somewhere like that.
Or even just the wife by herself.
So
But you're still supporting
so you're saying,
that
or I totally agree with this, that your wife should be appealing to you regardless of anything. So does that make sense? Is that what you're
No. You mean, should I humiliate my wife and say, I want you to dress up like a dog?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you should God created the woman, period, by her alone. Your wife alone should be able to please you, and she should be appealing to you. You shouldn't need any other.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Absolutely, guys.
You shouldn't have to.
And the fact that, part of the problem we've got in both the church and in society is men are watching internet pornography and they're seeing all of these quote-unquote fantasy situations, and they are expecting that in their home, and it is causing problems in a marriage because our real-life wives are not actresses, they are real human beings, and we don't get to airbrush them and cover up all of their spots and their whatever. And guys, it will mess up your marriage if you get addicted to that. I promise you that.
I also think, just a real quick side note, I think it's also important you to be an example. I mean, whether it's wrong or whether it's not, Romans 14 tells us if it's going to cause somebody else to stumble, we need to refrain from it.
Absolutely, which is one of the reasons why, Dustin, when it comes to the topic of beverage alcohol,
right,
I'm trying to teach people that I don't care where you are personally. If you're one of these that says, hey, the Bible says, uses a word that means alcohol or it doesn't mean I don't care. My thing is, what is your influence doing to other people? when you walk into a liquor store, what are you telling the person who owns the liquor store, the customers in the liquor store, the people that watch you walk out of a liquor store?
You can tell me.
Right.
So, Chuck, we totally got way discombobulated.
Sorry.
So let's try to rein back away from all this other stuff and get back to you.
All right. Abortion got a 1 on, so that was good for 50 people in that town. And none of these people are Christians. I have a different survey that I sent to Brad, but this is the one without Christians. With the exception of that person who was baptized into Christ, but they're not in a Church of Christ, depending on how you feel about that. Contraception, I got an 8. Condoms was basically where it was generalized, centered. The morning after pill, I got a 6. But there were people that were down on 1s, and there were people who were up at 10. Most people understood it that when the zygote is created, then the morning after pill is used, and it terminates that pregnancy. So that's how most people viewed it. Use of aborted babies for stem cell research, that averaged out to a 3. So people thought it was unethical for the most part. And the second one, pretty much, the very next one lets me know that people didn't quite understand the difference between using aborted babies for stem cell research, and the next one is using umbilical cord blood. That was an 8. And people were all over the board on that one. I don't have percentages. Homosexuality, that's down at a 1. Slavery is an 8.
That really surprised me, man.
Yeah.
That really surprised me.
So, Chuck, the low number is good, or
The low number is bad.
the low number is bad?
And
Yeah. Most people thought slavery was ethical.
what?
Wow.
The qualifier was going back to other societies and not America. Not looking at the slavery that happened in America. And most of the people pointed back to places like Ephesians and Colossians.
Well, it's okay to have a slave.
Right. Looking at the working relationship. So they're looking at an ethical slavery being ethical. Termination of the brain dead, kept alive by machine. And I probably could have worded that better, but that was up at a 9, being ethical. And my very last one was prejudice, and I put it all the way down at the bottom because of where you have slavery, you have homosexuality, and remember, people were at a 1 on homosexuality, so it doesn't seem that they even see homosexuality as being something to be prejudiced against as much as it's just not godly. Prejudice is at a 2. So for me, it was clear that people didn't understand the use of aborted babies and umbilical cord. People also didn't understand, for the most part, the use of the morning after pill. Nor people kept alive by a machine, but they're brain dead. I polled some people on Facebook as well, and these are Christians. One guy is a preacher in Henderson, Tennessee, where Freed Hardman reigns supreme. Number 1 was XXX bookstores. He rated that as a 5. Number 2 was abortions. He rated
That was a preacher?
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
The guy I went to Freed with.
Good grief.
Number 2 was abortions. He rated that as a 3. as being not ethical, but he rated it as a 3.
Wow.
See, condoms, contraception, 10. The morning after pill, he rated that as a 3, as being not ethical. Use of aborted babies for stem cell research, 8.
Wow.
Use of umbilical cord blood for stem cell research, 9. So he understands.
So that's just
Homosexuality, 8.
Intended to bring with it.
I wonder if he misinterpreted the. No.
I wrote him back about it. He said, I completely understand.
Oh.
He even wrote ethically okay out beside it, and that's the only one that he put a qualifier by.
That wasn't Casey Haynes, was it?
No.
I
Casey's
was about to
good.
say.
Let's see, slavery, a 2. Termination of the brain dead, kept alive by machine, 8. And prejudice, he rated that as a 9.
It's okay to be prejudiced.
So this man is currently working for a congregation right now.
But can I ask you, is he white or black?
He's black.
Black? And he's okay with prejudice?
And slavery?
He's an idiot.
And
Sorry.
slavery.
He's an idiot. I'm gonna say it.
No, slavery he put at a 2.
Land that plane.
I don't care.
What are your parameters, either 1 or 10?
No. 10, anywhere between, on a scale of 1 to 10.
Right, it was from either 1 to 10.
So he's
He
sort of
couldn't-
not.
He couldn't take a strong 1 or 10 on anything.
That's not good.
That's that's bizarre.
Imagine what his preaching's like.
Is this Church of Christ? Like
Church
the
of
church?
Christ.
Might have to be baptized.
Probably a 2.
Maybe. Maybe. No.
Give it
All right.
Hey.
Those are my findings.
Any follow up with Chuck? Besides the fact that last comment just kind of made me sick.
Yeah.
The follow-up would be he needs to speak to his. Is that your friend?
Yes.
Friend? Man.
Well, acquaintance through an acquaintance, but I still need to talk to him.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. Guys, I hope one of the things that you're seeing that is repeating as we go through this process is there is a general lack of knowledge on a lot of the topics that we're talking about in this class. And I don't know, when I talk to Denny about teaching this class, to my knowledge, they've never offered ethics before. My thought is these are topics that people are struggling with but may not be educated in. And as such, why not educate you all to where you have a biblical foundation, and then you can turn around and teach congregations, you can teach youth groups, you can teach your families to build a biblical foundation. And I hope you're starting to see, hey, you know what, this is actually a fairly decent use of a couple hours. Who else is ready or left? Dun, dun, dun.
I think that's it. I emailed you, Brad. I'm gonna have mine. I can tell you what it's gonna be on, though. I've started.
Okay.
Actually gonna be on, here, let me see what, get my notes out. I'm gonna pull up my survey.
Okay.
It's regarding, well, I'll tell you what happened. A little over 4 years ago, my dad, he's an elder in the church in Dallas. The doctor said he was going to die, basically. And members of the church stayed there, and they kept him on life support, and they prayed about it, and he lived. And he's alive today and doing fairly well. Well, he says if that ever happens to him again, he wants us to shut the equipment off. He does not want to go through what he's gone through the last 4 years. He had a heart attack, kidney failure, lost vision in one eye, had some toes amputated, and just a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm keeping mine simple. It's a survey on euthanasia, and it's going to be,
Good.
I'm trying to get 40 non-Christians, and then how many ever Christians I get, because a lot of these Christians are going to be helping me get the non-Christians. And the questions are, first one, which is not euthanasia, is it okay to take someone is terminally ill, the doctors say they're going to for sure die, is it okay to take them off life support? And then why? And see what kind what that draws out of somebody. The next question is it okay to perform euthanasia? And I have in the title, I have the definition of euthanasia. It's a noun, and then I have the definition from Webster's, one of Webster's dictionaries. Now, the next question is, are you a Christian? And then I have in parentheses, member of Church of Christ. And then I have down some space there. If not, then what denomination? So what I'm trying to do is to see if people are, if it's, what denominations feel about euthanasia and taking people off life support. If they're going to, the doctors say they're going to die. And also, some of these people that are helping me, because I'm in a hurry to get this done because I'm already getting penalized, are going to be able to use this to open some doors, because the Church of Christ is going to come up, Romans 16:16. And Christian, Church of Christ fits together to make sense. Well, they're going to say, no, I'm Baptist, but I'm a Christian,
Right.
And I know a number of non-Christians, but I'm not going to have all this accumulated probably till Saturday. And, but so there's going to be, it's just basically, real basic. Take them off life support, why? Euthanasia, why? And then, are you a Christian, Church of Christ, or what denomination?
Okay. Very good. Guys, I hope one of the things that you took away from this whole exercise is it is very, very hard to talk to people.
Amen.
I had 2 or 3 of you talking about going to the mall or going to Target or going wherever and getting frustrated because people would not talk to you. One of the things that you need to get from this total exercise is not just, hey, it's hard to do a Christian ethics survey. I want you to think about, what is it going to be like when I graduate and they hand me my diploma and now I have to talk to people about God? Because, even though in some of our classes we make it sound easy and we put you through, the Open Bible Study or Fishers of Men course or whatever, and we talk about evangelism, oftentimes when you talk about, when you try to approach somebody and you say, hey, I'd love to share a few minutes with you, what are your thoughts on God? They're going to do exactly what they did to Dustin, or exactly what they did to, who else was it that tried to do a public deal? Where they basically say, not interested, don't want any, take your survey back, get away from me. Unfortunately, that's the way it is in the United States. Now, some other countries, it's a lot easier to broach people, and that's why we got a lot of missionaries in places like Africa and India and places where they're receptive to the word. But don't forget the fact that we need domestic missionaries in this country who are still willing to try to reach out to folks and teach them some things. All right. Yes, sir.
What all do you want in hard copy? You want...
If you've got surveys, that's great. Like if you've got physical copies, I heard some of you say, hey, I did this through email or through Facebook. If you can print out, some of those sheets or print out a page off your Facebook, whatever, just to kind of show me some of the feedback you were getting, then that'd be good.
Okay.
All right, two real quick case studies because I want to wrap up the topic of euthanasia. John, do you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to say real quick with my survey, I tried something where instead of going to businesses and focusing on customers, I went to the employees. My survey wasn't as abrasive as some of the issues like abortion or stem cell, but number one, they couldn't run away from me because they're at work. Number two, I only hit them if they weren't dealing with the customer. I tried to get the hours of the day where they're more of a lull when they weren't doing much, I made it as quick as possible. I said, hey, listen, it's only going to be about a minute and a half, 2-minute long survey. If you have the opportunity, I'd love to just ask you an opinion questions.
Yeah.
And I only had 2 people said no, it's against company policy. That was it.
Okay, very good. Guys, I do hope that the experience itself was good, and I really hope that listening to your fellow classmates, listening to what's going on in society out there, that's kind of been eye-opening. And I found this very interesting. As you guys were sending me all of your surveys, the one thing that really stuck out in my head was I allowed you guys to make up the survey yourself. Do you realize basically nobody was asking the same questions? I mean, we did have two folks that focused on a similar topic, but even the people who focused on a similar topic came at it from different perspectives. And so in a classroom of, 10, 12 people, you got all these different factors that were asked, that were, polled or whatever. And I thought, to me, myself, that was kind of unique in and of itself, that nobody stuck to just a plain Jane, we got everything from surrogacy to abortion to just what is your ethical principles, all across the board. So that was a neat finding. Let's wrap up euthanasia very quickly. Case study number 1. Diane Pretty suffered from motor neuron disease that left her paralyzed from the neck down. She was in need of 24-hour care. She faced an unpleasant death. Unable to end her own life, she wanted her husband to help her die without being prosecuted. How do you rule?
As a Christian.
Do you allow the husband to do that?
No.
No.
Yeah, they couldn't no way do it.
No. Murder.
Okay, the court system would agree with all of you on that one. She tried to go to the court to get permission to help her to die. She failed. She died without any assistance several months later. Case number 2 is a little more tricky. Ms. Mary Orman suffered from a series of strokes, and the only way that she could be kept alive was to force feed her through a syringe. So you got a lady who is totally functional one day, she has strokes, and all of a sudden her life turns upside down. She ceased to communicate with the outside world after several weeks. Her doctor and her daughters made the conscious decision to allow her to starve to death in the nursing home. They had taken a conscious decision to withhold nutritional supplement, a supplement called Frasubin, from the 85-year-old. She weighed less than 80 pounds when she died. Nurses brought this to the attention of the authorities. They believed that what the doctor and family did was wrong. They bring it to your courtroom. How would you view it?
Malpractice.
Okay, we got a malpractice. What else?
They're going to allow it. It's family.
Do what?
They will allow it.
If you do that to an animal,
That's
you go to
been
jail.
done legally.
But you have
KJ just pointed out something that's interesting. Do you know in almost every state, if they come up and they find that you are mistreating animals, whether it be from malnourishment or if you've got animals that are not well taken care of, they can big time put you in jail. Big time. Somebody, Chuck or Quentin One, had a comment.
Where my wife works at a nursing home, there's a man who is going to die within the next couple of months, no doubt about it. But his family would rather him starve instead of keeping him on life support.
Yep.
And the facility can't do anything about it because it's legal on the books in Colorado.
Yep. And I'll go ahead and tell you guys, you don't die of starvation, you die of dehydration. And what ultimately happens is your lips start to crack. You guys, everybody there has probably had chapped lips. Well, think about having chapped lips to the point where your tongue becomes so dehydrated that it protrudes out of your mouth and begins to bleed. I don't know if any of you guys have ever experienced real thirst, real true dehydration. But you take that point where in your mind you're thinking, I've got to get something to drink, and now you multiply that by 4 or 5 more days. And that's what the person's going through. In this particular case, let me go ahead and give you the bottom line. The doctor who took the decision was actually suspended. The regulatory body of doctors, after the nurses at the home complained about his actions. They had opposed his decision to withdraw treatment, had secretly given food to this person. A legal procedure followed, which ended in a charge of attempted murder. This doctor remains the only doctor ever to be convicted in the United Kingdom of attempting to perform a mercy killing. Despite the verdict, the Crown Court imposed a suspended sentence, let him off with a strong reprimand. So in that particular case, the doctor actually took the fault. They took the heat for making a decision on a person, a decision that ultimately would bring about their death. We talked last week, and I do want to at least review these. I gave you guys several verses, and we talked a little bit about how should we treat the elderly. Let's see. Let me flip through a couple of these. God charges his people to benevolent care for the poor, the aged, the handicapped, and the unwanted, not to kill them. So just as a real quick reminder, Leviticus 19, verse 32. You shall rise before the gray-headed, honor the presence of an old man, fear your God, I am the Lord. Psalm 71, verse 9, do not cast me off in the time of old age, do not forsake me when my strength fails. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 3 and following, honor the widows who are really widows. But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show piety at home, to repay their parents, for this is good and acceptable before God. If anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Now, let me ask you a question that we barely touched on last time, and we need to get back to today, and that is this. Does this verse mean that you are not ever allowed to put your parents into a facility?
No.
Okay? Give me some situations in which it would be acceptable for a Christian to do that. Okay, Jay.
If they need care that you cannot give them yourself, like you don't know the ins and outs of medical things, so you have to, get them help with that.
Okay, if they need a trained professional,
Right.
in other words, let's say they are on a catheter, or they need their lungs suctioned, or something to that effect, then all of a sudden you have just changed from a loving situation where you're trying to take care of your parents to an individual who needs serious medical care. What else? There's another one or two that I can think of. Dean?
If they request it, would that be all right? They come to you one day and say, "Hey, I would like to be put into a facility."
Yeah, but there again, what is the rationale behind most people saying that? Why would they say that?
They feel like a burden.
They don't want to feel like a burden. And so as faithful Christians, guys, we need to make sure that our parents don't feel like a burden. Because to me, that's part of the equation. If they look at us and smile and say, "Oh, I really want to go to Oak Meadows and put me out in the back pasture," well, are they really saying, "I think you're busy and your lifestyle doesn't accommodate me, and I've become a burden, so therefore just go on and stick me out in the pasture"? There's another instance where I could see that somebody would need or could justify putting them, Dustin.
Yeah, what if they're coming between you and God?
Yeah.
That happened to my mother, actually, with her mom.
Okay.
She couldn't do anything else but care for her. She couldn't go to church. She couldn't. We even stopped having our Bible study at home because there was no time for it.
That's a great point. Think about it, guys. Believe it or not, there are people who start to take on 24-hour care. And by that I mean it's somebody that you've got to monitor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That can separate you and your God. It could also even separate you and your spouse. And so suddenly that relationship that, you're supposed to honor and love your parents is actually disintegrating all your other relationships. And so in that case, basically you may have to reevaluate. Michael.
Well, an example I'll give, my grandpa was 94 years old. He'd had a stroke and was basically he wasn't all there, but he wasn't like a child, okay? Well, he had to be bathed, he had to be fed, not professional help, but his food had to be ground up in a blender. Anyway, he had to be watched 24/7. So the family decided to put him in a nursing home. Well, he had enough there on the ball that he starts calling lawyers and, complaining that he's not being treated right in this nursing home, which he really was one of the best ones in that area in Texas. But the point is, he needed to be watched 24/7. There's a lot of things he could still do, but we didn't know, or they didn't know exactly what he would do if he was left alone for a couple, 3 hours. And so that's a real burden. And he had to
Absolutely.
But he was still partially there. He wasn't, totally, gone as far as, the stroke.
What about somebody, for instance, that is suffering from end-stage Alzheimer's?
They can get violent.
They can get violent? What about that scary moment when you wake up and you realize during the night they got up out of their bed and walked out the front door? And all of a sudden, they're nowhere to be found. Or somebody maybe that has Parkinson's so bad that, the shaking, the physical side of Parkinson's has caused them to not be able to function. Understand that what we're talking about here is it's a fine line. It's very difficult. It's something that I think as preachers, we need to be prepared to give counsel, because more and more people are going to be coming to us saying, what should I do about my parents? What should I do about my mom? And guys, until you have changed diapers for a 70, 80-year-old man, those are some pretty big shoes to walk into. I worked in an Alzheimer's facility for about 2 semesters when I was in undergrad. And, this is not glamorous, this is not glorious, but I'll tell you what, I had to give enemas on occasion to individuals who had Alzheimer's. That is not a fun thing, because number one, they don't know you. Number two, they are with it enough to know they feel like they're being violated. But number three, if you don't do that physically to their body, they're going to have some pretty major problems, pretty major ailments later on. So you're stuck in this quandary of, okay, how do I get somebody with Alzheimer's to basically drop their pants so that I can give them an enema? Very, very serious situation that I think in many cases a normal family member may not be prepared to take care of and do. These are things that we got to be prepared for. Comments, thoughts. What is the bottom line for Christians and euthanasia?
Wrong. Murder.
It is wrong. It is wrong. Who gives us life and who gets to take away life?
G.
All right. If I were to say God has assigned every man what?
Soul.
A time to die. So it's not our place to mess with his clock. That's what I want you to remember. So when somebody comes to you and they want counsel, first and foremost thing that you need to do is you need to establish in their heart and their mind the sanctity of human life. And you need to say, thankfully, we've got a God who is in control, and even though the situation may be bad, and your wife may have pancreatic cancer or liver cancer, or they may be suffering, we can take care of the suffering. We've got drugs that will help alleviate the pain. We can take care of the depression. We've got drugs that can help with the depression. But as far as declaring taking a life, that is not our call. We don't get to make that choice. Dean, you're working in an emergency room.
Oh, goodness.
You got somebody that comes into you, car wreck, They've gone through the windshield doing about 60 miles an hour. They hit a telephone pole. Physically, their body hit the telephone pole. Okay? You see lacerated skull. They're laying in front of you. Their pupils are shot. They have no reflexes. While they have some spontaneous respirations, basically, this person is not there. The family comes up to you. You've already ordered things like a CAT scan, and you see that their brain is swelling. You already see that there may be some internal injuries. What do you tell the family?
Just, I tell the family that based on the, obviously you tell them the results of what you've seen in the CAT scan, or what you see physically, the lacerated skulls, pupil shot, there's internal bleeding. I don't tell them anything more than what I've seen based on results.
Speak real slow.
So,
They want to know what to do.
my advice is pray and let nature take its course.
Okay, so do you hook them up to a machine or not?
No, because if I decide to pull the plug on that machine, I've decided whether that person's died or not. I've made the decision
Okay.
whether they live or not. So no, I don't
Okay.
hook up to a machine.
Okay. Mr. Coker, you got somebody who has been in what you feel like is a vegetative state for a month. They have not responded in any such way to you at all. The family looks at you and they say, look, if our person is in this vegetative state, they're not going to respond. They have a pulse. They may have some midbrain waves, but basically it looks like their whole frontal cortex is gone. They've never showed any reflex. When if you take a pin, you stick them anywhere on their body, nothing. You shine a light in their eyes, you're not getting nothing. You're feeding them through a tube. That's basically what's keeping them alive. They approach you and they are curious and anxious to maybe stop all of this. How do you advise them?
How long has this person been out? You said a month?
A month.
I would advise them to stick it out more. I would ask them to pray about it, and we all pray about it together. And,
Okay, good counsel. Now let's take it out to 3 years.
Yeah, I pray more.
Oh, goodness.
I'm serious, because I don't know, ending life is wrong, but, and if you decide to end that life then, that seems, inconsistent with what we talked about earlier, about the quality of life, how that's an argument that the world makes. So,
Okay. If the family is literally knocking on your door saying, Dr. James, this is costing us $20,000 a week. This person has not made even one eye blink to us. And they're starting to get massive bed sores. We just want some closure.
Ooh, that's tough. I just don't know. I just know whatever decision we make, we just ask God that it be according to His will, and if we do the wrong one, we just pray that we have forgiveness and we don't do it again. We learn the truth, because I don't know.
All right, let me see a show of hands. How many of you in there would eventually allow that person
Wait a minute.
to allow the family to go ahead and just pull the plug and end the suffering? Let me see some hands.
I have a question before that, though.
Yeah, I do too.
Does this individual have a will or a living will?
No.
Hey, Brad,
John.
you had brought up the scenario that he has middle brain activity. What does that indicate to me? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Oh, that's dirty.
Because isn't that going to help me determine my answer?
It should, yes.
Okay, well then I'm not going to raise my hand then.
James, the guy that I just described to you has what we call locked-in state, which means they are perfectly alive, perfectly conscious of everything going on around them.
Oh.
They are simply locked into their body and cannot communicate with the outside world.
Man.
Had you pulled the plug on this guy, he would have known it, would have watched you as you did it. Now, let's talk a little bit about all of these topics. What I need everybody in there to understand, we are going to go through this sequentially, okay? And by that I mean the steps that I give you are going to be the normal steps for somebody that comes in for, say, a brain injury. The very first thing that all people who suffer any kind of brain injury go through is what we generally refer to as coma. So you got somebody who is in a coma state. What is coma state? Simply put, if we were to define it, it's a state of profound unconsciousness from which one cannot be roused. It's usually following a traumatic injury. Unconscious patients are said to be in a coma. Following several days or even weeks, patients who do not recover or die, notice this, they leave a coma state, and all of a sudden they're going to go into a different state. So if somebody tells you that Aunt Ethel has been in a coma for so many years, that's garbage. Nobody does that. The easiest way for me to describe a coma to you is this. If you think of the brain as a fairly fluid organ, the brain itself can be bruised and often is bruised. And I'm having some really weird, let me see if I can get you guys back because I'm seeing like fuzz right now on the screen. Somebody talk, see if it'll kick it back to you.
Brad, I got a question. Another question.
Go ahead.
So, this individual in a locked-in state, if you pull the plug, what happens to him?
They die.
Okay, so he's being sustained through artificial means, correct?
Yes. Yes.
If you remove those artificial means, he's going to die.
Right.
Okay.
So you just killed somebody that is conscious
But wait a minute.
that you killed him.
Haven't you just given that person the opportunity, or you let that person die, as they would have had it not been for the artificial interference?
But here's the kicker. They are totally healthy on the inside.
Right. Okay.
They just can't communicate.
Okay,
They just
so
can't.
So locked-in state then would be different than
Brain dead.
someone.
Yes.
Brain dead.
And that's you guys follow along with me. We're going to go through all of these. I want to do it sequentially though. First step is coma. Okay. If you think of coma this way, basically your brain, believe it or not, your brain can bruise. And the most common place for your brain to bruise is if you either whiplash or if you hit something like a windshield, your brain will hit the front of your skull and will start to expand. If you whiplash, your brain hits the back of your skull and it starts to expand. Well, I hope everybody in there realizes your brain doesn't have a whole lot of room to expand. So as it's growing, guess what it's doing?
Bruising.
It's putting pressure back on itself,
Right.
and it shuts things down. Okay? That's coma in a nutshell. Coma is when the brain is expanded, it has bruised itself, it's putting pressure on areas, and all of a sudden maybe your ability to move your arm shuts down, and then your ability to speak shuts down, and then depending on how much it's expanding, it may shut down a whole lot of stuff. So coma is the first state. As I mentioned, it normally only lasts a few weeks. From coma, one of two things usually are going to happen. You get better, or you go into a vegetative state. So here's the deal. Somebody in a coma, their brain gets big. When it goes down, they're going to recover enough that they can leave the hospital, or the swelling goes down and you realize we got permanent damage. When it expanded, we got other problems going on in there. So the first thing that you got to understand is, if you are a preacher and you get that call in the middle of the night and your person says, hey, my loved one has got a coma, first thing you need to remember is that's temporary. We got to see what's going to happen when the brain swelling goes down. Don't make a quick decision based on that.
Who does that, though? Who makes a quick
A lot of people. Who does? Very unintelligent, uninformed people.
What would the quick decision be to just end their life?
Wouldn't it?
Well, okay, KJ, let's say that your doctor comes to you and says, you got a lovely spouse here. I need to hook them up on a respirator. They're not getting enough oxygen. They're in a coma. Well, if somebody doesn't understand what a coma is, they may say, no, Aunt Bessie said never put her on those machines. We don't want to do that. Well, folks, coma is a temporary state. Aunt Bessie, once her brain shrinks back down, Aunt Bessie may get up and walk out of the hospital. So you got to know kind of where we are in the whole thing. Let's go to number 2, second point. So you leave a coma state and you go to what we call a persistent vegetative state. You either get better or you go into this particular state. You say, okay, what is a vegetative state? First described in 1972, although many physicians find the original term persistent to be misleading because some can actually come out of it. As such, a lot of people use the diagnosis of simply a vegetative state. Persons diagnosed in a vegetative state show no behavioral evidence of awareness or aware of themselves or their environment. There's brain damage, usually of a known cause, consistent with the diagnosis. Okay? In order for somebody to be diagnosed in a permanent vegetative state, there should be no reversible causes present, and you got to have 6 to 12 months that have passed since the onset. In other words, nobody can say that person is in a permanent vegetative state until they've been that way for 12 months without any kind of interaction. Okay? So let's say you get the call, somebody says my loved one went through the windshield, they've come out of a coma. And let me back up and show you something, just to make sure you didn't miss it. Notice this. If you are in a coma, you're going to come out of a coma and you're actually going to, my computer's acting up a little bit. You're actually going to have periods of wake and sleep. So while you're in a coma, you don't have those periods of wakefulness. Okay, my computer's really getting on my nerves here.
That's why you don't get a Mac.
Here we go. I know somebody didn't say Mac. One of the ways that a doctor can diagnose that a person is no longer in a coma is if that person starts experiencing REM sleep, or they go through periods where their eyes are awake, even though they may not track anything, they wake up and then they go back to sleep. Once they resume those periods of sleep and awakefulness, that means the brain has shrunk down enough that now they are going to be either in a vegetative state or something else. All right, so coma is temporary. Coma is brain bruising or expansion. From that, we go to something like a vegetative state, which is more serious. In order for you to truly be in a vegetative state, you got to have a long period of time that passes. Another category that we got to be aware of is brain death. Brain death, sometimes called whole brain death, occurs when the entire brain, including the brain stem, is irreversibly damaged. Patients who are brain dead are routinely placed on ventilators to keep their organs alive because the brain is unable to signal the lungs to inspire. Here's what you need to know about this. If you are ever in a situation where you're having to counsel a family, and the doctor comes in and they say that so-and-so is brain dead, by definition, that person is dead. There has never been, ever, in the history of mankind, anyone come back from brain dead. Because the very definition of brain death in and of itself is your brain is dead. There is no coming back. You don't get a second option on that. So brain death is ultimate death. It is when the person is completely gone, the soul has left the body, and John, yes.
Is that confirmed through like an EEG or something?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you guys hear the term flatline, oftentimes we associate that with the heart. And we're going to talk a little bit, maybe on Tuesday, because our time is slipping away today. We're going to talk a little bit about the fact that we've changed the way we define how a person is dead. It used to be the heart. They used to say, okay, if this person has no heartbeat, the person is dead. Well, then we realized, you know what, the brain can actually still be functioning, and we may be able to jumpstart the heart. So we can't use a flatline heart. We've got to use a flatline brain, because if the brain is gone, the brain controls everything else. It ain't coming back. And you can't do a brain transplant, and you can't put a defibrillator and say, whoop, clear, and shock the brain. That ain't working.
Let me ask that question again. As far as by law, do they have to confirm it through EEG?
No.
No.
Well, I take that back. If somebody is going to tell you that this is brain death, yes. Now, do they have to, do they do an EEG for every person that's died? No. Absolutely not.
Right, but I mean, if there's like the stages of coma to persistent
Right.
yeah. Then say, well, they're probably brain dead. Well, I don't want to hear a probably. I want to hear a confirmed.
No, you don't. No, and here's why you don't want to hear probably. The very next thing that we're going to talk about is a very, very real case, and it's where somebody is locked in. It's called locked-in syndrome or midbrain death. And in this particular situation, you've got a person who shares most of the similarities with a persistent vegetative state because they're paralyzed, but there's a major difference in that they are completely aware of their surroundings. Some of them can move their eyes purposefully, some of them can't. So they're conscious. Sometimes they can communicate with people around them with their eyes, sometimes they can't, but they're locked into a body that does not allow them to move or communicate with the outside world. In this case, guys, your brain stem is fully functional. Your lungs, your heart should be in good shape unless you've injured them somehow. But the fact of the matter is you cannot communicate with the outside world. If you kill somebody in that environment, to me, I can't think of a more tragic thing than somebody being locked in their body realizing you're about to kill me.
What do you do? Do those people have brain act like your EKG deal?
That's the key factor right here, guys. They have lost their midbrain, but they have not lost their brain stem, meaning if you hook them up to an EEG, what the doctor will tell you is they've lost most of their brain activity. Or they may try to persuade you by saying it looks like the majority of their brain is dead, or they don't have much brain activity. Well, the translation of that is they do have some.
Can they come back from that?
Yes. In some cases, there have been people that have been locked in. They come out of it, and they tell some pretty horrifying stories. They remember everything. They remember nurses coming in, and the nurse being very cruel as far as injecting them with shots. You know, they remember people who sing to them and don't sing, everything. They remember conversations of people who think they're basically gone, and you got, Uncle Edgar over here fighting over the dude's tractor. Well, I really always always wanted one of them John Deeres.
Wow.
Wow.
That's dirty.
So you're in a hospital.
Brad?
Yes.
Do you have any kind of statistics of the coma state and also this locked syndrome of people who walk away from it?
I got an article I'm going to send to you guys to read. I wrote it a long time ago, though, that will give you, not only is it going to give you all of this stuff, but it's also going to give you some cases of people who actually came out of this stuff. Probably the leading guy was a guy by the name of Gary Dockery. He was in a vegetative state, guys, for 7.5 years and came out of it completely.
Wow.
Yeah. Big wow. Like, holy cow, wow. You got a police officer who goes from basically everybody thinking he's dead, why are we keeping him alive, to, they said basically the first 24 hours he came out, he talked nonstop for 24 hours. It was just like they couldn't shut him up.
I bet.
All right. Let's look at one or two more, because I want us to make sure we got some of these things, some of the definitions clear in our head. Next is terminal sedation. Terminal sedation would be a situation where you got high doses of sedatives that relieve extremes of physical distress. Its purpose is to render the patient unconscious, to relieve suffering until the patient dies from his or her disease. So in other words, let's say we've got somebody who is got liver cancer or bone cancer. Bone cancer is one of the most painful of all the cancers. Their loved ones come to you and they say, I want you to basically take them out. Not kill them, but I want you to give them so much pain medicine that they are going to go unconscious until they die, so that they won't feel the pain. The next one is called double effect. Double effect is probably one of the most common things that happens. And that is a situation where you're using a medicine, it's administered with the intent of relieving pain, but the doctor also knows that a consequence of that medicine will suppress the respiratory system. And so you got somebody who's in pain, they give them a shot of morphine to kill the pain, but the doctor also knows in the back of his mind, what I'm giving this person is also going to suppress their respiratory system and hasten their death. So even though the result may be expected, as long as the intent was not to hasten the death, the action is not prohibited by bioethics principles. Okay, with all of that in mind, we only got 5 minutes, so I need to get back to, because we didn't get a whole lot of ground covered. With all of that said, what I need you guys to understand is I'm a firm believer that people need to understand the difference in some of these, because there's a huge difference in a doctor telling a family, your daughter is in a coma, versus your daughter is brain dead, versus your daughter is in a persistent vegetative state. What is the only clear conscience rule that we can make as faithful Christians when it comes to pulling the plug? What is the only case that I've given you where it's safe to pull the plug?
Brain dead.
Brain dead. Everything else, if we really truly believe that God's Word is infinitely wise, that He is the only authority when it comes to knowledge, and that the sanctity of life is really to be upheld, then we've got to realize all of the other cases, there's still brain activity. Now, I wish that I could look at each one of you and say that all of the stuff that I just told you is a very clear-cut case and that it's all nice and pretty and we can put it in a nice little box. But as you can imagine, injury to the brain is a spectrum. It's not a clear-cut, basically, okay, because your brain hits your forehead going at 50 miles an hour, you're going to be in coma for 5 days, and then you're going to come out and you're going to be... No. Brain injury is a spectrum. And as such, one of the things that I always counsel people is you need to be patient, you need to pray, and you need to seek God's wisdom, because who knows what's going to happen when that brain finally shrinks and when you start getting environmental stimulus and those neurons start firing again. Who knows how much you're going to be able to recapture, how much, oftentimes doctors are quick to say, well, they're going to lose some activity, there's going to be probably some brain damage, because they're kind of hedging their bets. They want to make sure you understand, we think that there's going to be some problems here. And so they cover themselves. When the reality of it is they don't have a clue until everything goes down what's going on. And so they have to basically be patient and wait. One of the most tragic things that I personally have had to deal with, I did a seminar out in California, a little congregation in mid-California on the coast, and got to know them. Actually went out there twice, got to know the church family, know many of the people. They called me and told me that one of the members, who was in his 20s, late 20s, had slipped, fell, hit his head, and basically they said, look, we're trying to make a decision, should we pull the plug? And so I immediately replied and said, absolutely not, too quick, you're making this decision too hastily, let everything settle down. Well, this particular person was obese. They were about 450 pounds, had diabetes, had some other problems. A sister flew into town, saw her brother laid up on all these machines, tells the doctor and the family, if we go ahead and pull the plug now, we can have the funeral on Saturday. I can be back at the office on Monday.
That's ridiculous.
So some of the family members call me. They say, Brad, here's what the sister's wanting to do. We're kind of freaking out here. So I called the neurologist. I said, do you mind faxing me his EEGs? Because they're wanting basically they're wanting counsel from me. He did so. Dude clearly had brain activity. And I mean, as much brain, not as much as I have right now, but he clearly had brain activity. And yet they pulled the plug, guys. This, to me, that was a definite case of doing the wrong thing. And I'm convinced to this day that had they waited a week or two, not only would this young man have come out of it in some condition, he may have fully recovered. And yet, because of their haste, because they see him hooked up to these machines, they made a horrible decision. And part of that I would place on their neurologist for not giving them good counsel, but you can kind of see what's going on. On Thursday, or next Tuesday, because we didn't get nearly anywhere even into this, on Tuesday, we're going to pick up right here where we are, talking about coma, talking about vegetative state. We want to start by looking at the idea of advanced directives. What is a living will? Should Christians have a living will? And then we're going to jump more into things like feeding tubes, pulling the plug. We're going to talk about Terry Schiavo and some of those folks. So be ready. Appreciate you guys. Y'all keep up the fight, and I will talk to you on Tuesday.
Hey, Brad?
Yeah.
Do we get a review paper in the class, the test?
Do you get what now?
Do we get a review sheet?
Do you get a review sheet? No.
So basically, today we need to know what, like, double effect, terminal, locked-in syndrome, mid-range.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Absolutely.
All right.
Very good, guys. Thank you.